You happy with yourself?
No, never.
Hi, I'm Stella and welcome to my channel 30 Books, where I talk about Australian books and Australian writers to inspire you to rush out and buy or borrow an Australian book. And what better place to talk about books than a fantastic bookstore, Blarney's Books and Art, here in Port Fairy. And I just happen to be amongst the stacks, and here's an Australian writer right now, Michelle Scott Tucker. Thanks for your time on my channel.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to be here. What a coincidence we bumped into each other.
I know, and I also forgot to mention it is the Port Fairy Literary Weekend 2021, and you were just on talking about your book. What's the name of your book?
Elizabeth Macarthur, A Life at the Edge of the World. It's a biography of the woman who established the Australian wool industry, even though her husband got all the credit.
I have been reading about her. So Kate Grenville's book was similar to that. Are you going to pull a face about that book?
I would never pull a face about Kate Grenville. My book came out first, just saying. It's a biography, it's non-fiction. So I knew that she'd had some involvement in the wool industry. I knew that her husband was on the $2 note and was revered for establishing the Australian wool industry. And I knew she had some role, and that's all I knew. So I read everything that I could about her and found that her story was absolutely fascinating, that she was a player in Australian politics, she was a businesswoman in her own right, and I wanted to lift that story up into the light to make her better known than she currently is.
Tell me, is this your first book?
Yes, it is my first book. What was I thinking?
Really? Now, do you wish you had started earlier? When you were halfway through your book, did you think, I wish I had started earlier, or I wish I had never started at all?
I probably thought both those things, but I didn't have anything to say when I was younger. I had to wait until I had something to say before I had the incentive to write this book. So I started this book when my children were tiny, and they were much older by the time I finished. It took a good 12 years to pull it all together. It was like a knitting project. I'd pick it up and put it down, and I had a lot of fun with it. So it was a joy, and I was at the right time for me to write it when I did.
And what's next?
I'm ghostwriting a memoir for a businessman, a Queensland businessman who's an actor. He's got his own film and television production company. He's been a professional footballer. He's been a community health worker. He's been a King's Cross bouncer. His name's Aaron Faso, and he's a Torres Strait Islander. And so I'm writing his memoir for him. We're working on that together, and it should be really important. It's the first commercially published memoir by a Torres Strait Islander ever.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big deal. And Aaron's story is absolutely amazing. His life story is fascinating. His second wife took her own life, and so we talk about grief. He's not afraid to do the deep dive into the emotional stuff, but we'll also learn about the Torres Strait along the way and about the challenges and successes of the people of the Torres Strait. It's really interesting and really fun to write.
What do you like about non-fiction?
I like the not knowing of things, that you can't possibly know everything, and how permeable truth really is. What does truth mean? What's true? What's right? What's not right? Non-fiction shows, I think the best non-fiction talks about that there is no single truth. And I think the best fiction tells us what it is to be human and tells us some of the truths about what it is to be human. And the best non-fiction says to us, actually, there is no single truth.
Speaking of best non-fiction,
Uh-oh.
right, but what Australian non-fiction work do you particularly love, besides your own?
I do love the work of Inga Clendenin. Her Dancing with Strangers is really important. Marsha Langton's favourite Australian book is probably one of mine as well, which is What Contentious 1788. So What Contentious was a Marine on the First Fleet, and he basically wrote up his journal about his first 4 years in the colony. It is witty, it is amusing, it's an insight into that first contact between the new colonists and the Indigenous people of Sydney. It's just a page turner written in the 1700s. It's fantastic. What Contentious 1788, Text Publishing.
Fantastic. What question would you like me to ask you as a final question?
If I could write any book at all, what would I write if I had the money and the resources to do it?
Now, Michelle, If you could write any book at all and you had the money and the resources, what book would you write? Isn't that a great question?
Fantastic question. So good. I'd do a biography of Dolly Parton.
Oh.
So she and I would be BFFs.
What's your favourite Dolly song?
All of them.
Yeah.
I do like Little Sparrow. I quite like Little Sparrow, but the kids and I used to sing Applejack in the car really loudly.
Would you like to?
No, nobody wants that.
All right. Michelle Scott Tucker, author of Elizabeth Macarthur, A Life at the Edge of the World, out by Text, and she was a guest this weekend at the Port Fairy Literary Weekend 2021 here at Blarney Books and Arts.
And her next book, So Far So Good, a ghost-written memoir for Aaron Farso, should be out late next year. Don't miss it.